Let's jump right into this explainer, because today we're looking at what is essentially a geopolitical earthquake. We're standing on the precipice of an unprecedented shift in global trade, one that could literally rewrite the rules of how the whole world operates. Think about it. For over 80 years, we've taken something absolutely massive for granted, the fact that the oceans are free. But what if they suddenly weren't? $2 million. That is the staggering toll Iran is demanding to charge a single vessel just across the Strait of Hormuz. And to be clear, we aren't talking about pirates demanding a ransom in the shadows here. We are talking about a sovereign nation attempting to permanently toll one of the most vital natural waterways on Earth. It begs a really massive question. What actually happens to the global economy if the world's oceans are no longer free to navigate? To understand why this is so disruptive, we have to look at a bedrock principle of modern global trade. It's this concept called innocent passage. Basically, this is the legal right of merchant ships to pass freely through territorial waters without hindrance. It's a core guarantee of the 1994 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So Iran's demand to set up a permanent, formalized toll booth, it completely dismantles this international legal framework that has allowed modern globalization to flourish in the first place.
Okay, let's really dive into this. If Iran formally gets its way and controls the Strait of Hormuz with a toll system, they aren't just making a quick buck. They are effectively controlling the tap to the entire global economy. This isn't just about collecting transit fees. It's about becoming the ultimate gatekeeper. Overnight, they would transform into what economists call the global swing producer.
The reason that gatekeeper role is so absolutely crucial lies in the immense concentration of power in the region. Saudi Arabia and the broader Gulf Cooperation Council currently act as the central bank of global oil. They control anywhere between 80 to 95% of the world's spare oil capacity, meaning whenever there is a global shock, the entire world relies on the Gulf to pump more oil and stabilize prices.
And what's really fascinating about this dynamic is the terrifying paradigm shift it creates. Currently, Saudi Arabia holds global pricing power because of their sheer volume of spare oil. But if Iran gets sovereign control of the Strait of Hormuz, that immense power shifts overnight from Riyadh to Tehran. If Iran thinks the global price of oil is too low, well, they don't have to cut their own production, they can simply limit the number of tankers passing through the strait. They could effectively choke the economies of their regional rivals with the flip of a switch.
So, you might be wondering, why on earth would the United States or the international community ever allow this to happen? Well, a think tank in Brussels mapped out a very difficult dilemma. If the strait is completely closed due to war, global oil prices spike by an estimated $40 a barrel, which would send global inflation completely through the roof. But if they just accept Iran's toll system, the price only goes up by about 40 cents a barrel. From a purely economic standpoint, the toll is a much cheaper alternative to a closed strait.
And there is another massive strategic layer to this. $151 billion. That is the estimated upper limit of the extra oil revenue Russia stands to gain if the Strait of Hormuz remains completely closed. Because Russia is a major oil exporter, skyrocketing global prices directly fund their ongoing war in Ukraine. A negotiated open strait, even with a toll paid to Iran, denies Russia this massive windfall. So it actually offers a very strong incentive for Washington to just quietly accept the toll. Now, it's really easy to look at this demand and think it's just unprecedented modern-day extortion. But is it? Actually, scratch that. What Iran is attempting to do used to be the completely normal way the world worked. To really grasp the gravity of this shift, we need to step back in time. Let's rewind to the 15th century, when the Kingdom of Denmark established something called the Sound Dues. See, Denmark happened to geographically control the Øresund Strait, which was the only viable maritime route between the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. For centuries, any merchant ship passing through had to pull into Copenhagen and pay a toll. If they refused, Danish artillery on the coast would simply open fire on them. It wasn't until 1857 that the British and Russians finally pressured Denmark to stop. The historical parallel to what we are watching unfold today is undeniable. Denmark's sound dues provided up to 2/3 of the entire kingdom's income for centuries, making a tiny nation fabulously wealthy. But it also made them massive geopolitical enemies. Fast forward to today, and Iran's proposed toll over the Persian Gulf trade could fund up to 1/7 of their entire modern government operating budget. Tolling natural waterways is historically lucrative for sure, but it fundamentally pits you against every trading nation on Earth. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, don't ships pay to go through the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal today? Yes, they absolutely do. But there is a massive legal distinction between artificial canals and natural straits.
Egypt and Panama built and actively maintain artificial canals through their own sovereign land, so under international law, they are fully entitled to charge tolls for upkeep. Taxing a naturally occurring maritime strait, however, is a direct violation of decades of established international law.
So the crucial point we have to remember is this. For basically all of human history, merchants had to pay tolls, tributes, or bribes to empires and pirates just to move goods. The fact that for the last 80 years, a merchant could ship cargo across the globe for free, without fear of piracy or arbitrary taxes, is a massive historical anomaly. This era, known as the Pax Americana, has been upheld almost entirely by the U.S. Navy. It is literally the very foundation that allowed modern globalization to explode. But as we look at the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz, Pandora's box is already open. During the recent conflict, while the U.S. military was unable to stop it, Iran instituted an improvised toll system. And amazingly, ships from nations as diverse as China, Japan, India, and Egypt simply began paying it. They transferred cryptocurrency, stablecoins, or Chinese yuan to Iran in exchange for safe passage. The precedent has already been set on the water.
And if this becomes officially legitimized, the global consequences will be incredibly swift. Remember Denmark? Well, if Iran is allowed to toll the Strait of Hormuz, what legally stops Denmark from reintroducing its own historical sound dues on the Baltic Sea? Denmark could instantly justify charging tolls on Russian oil exports, potentially raking in $1.3 billion a year in new revenue. If the precedent of free oceans falls in the Middle East, it falls everywhere.
This creates a terrifying domino effect across the globe. Turkey could easily scrap older treaties and start heavily taxing the Bosphorus again. Nations bordering the Bab el-Mandab and the Red Sea could set up their own lucrative toll booths. Spain and Morocco could tax the Strait of Gibraltar, Indonesia could tax the Strait of Malacca, Canada could even begin tolling the rapidly opening Northwest Passage. The world map is full of these natural choke points, and suddenly they all become toll booths.
Accepting an Iranian toll booths over Hormuz wouldn't just be an isolated diplomatic concession. It represents a full-blown return back to the era of mercantilism, tax trade routes, and piracy. Globalization as we know it would just break down. Nations across the globe, from Europe to Asia, would suddenly be forced to pull investments away from their civilian economies and pour billions back into rebuilding massive navies, literally just to secure their own basic supply chains.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. We have lived our entire lives in a historical bubble, where the seas were an open, free highway for everyone. But as we watch these ships pay for safe passage today, we have to ask ourselves, are we watching that bubble burst? Is the modern era of globalization fading back into a fragmented, heavily taxed, and dangerous historical norm? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this really helped you see the global map in a completely new light.